Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm joined by someone who is joined by the likes of Doctor Doom, it looks like, and Adam from Eternia, Skeletor, Spider-Man 2099, Batman, just a range of characters here. And that is artist, creator William Russell. William, may I call you William?
Yeah, that's just fine, man.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for bringing all of the artistry and all of the faces that you are surrounded by at the moment as well.
No problem, man. Thank you for having me, man. I really do appreciate you guys wanted to talk to indie artists and creators, so that means a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Some of the best stuff that is being done out there. Absolutely. Department of
Yeah,
Truth being one of those. You mentioned Psycho Sal before we were
yeah.
recording. Damsel. Lots of amazing work that you're putting out into the world, and
Thank you.
definitely glad to have you to talk about the inspirations and the processes and how did you get started down this path?
Actually, it's a bit odd. 7 years ago, I've been doing this professionally for 6 years, but 7 years ago, I was with my other company. I worked with American Income Life, and I handled life insurance benefits for union members and stuff like that. And at that particular moment, I was already in that industry 6 years.
Hmm.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Loved the people I worked with, made very good money doing what I did. And at that particular point in time, 7 years ago, I actually hadn't picked a pencil up in 10 years.
Wow.
And I always wanted to break into comics. I always wanted to do something with my art. And of course, back then, especially, 10 years prior, to 7 years ago, there was really no social media or anything like that. If you wanted to be a comic artist, you had to go to Comic Cons, show your portfolios, hope someone liked it enough to give you a shot. And of course, growing up in Mississippi and being hours upon hours from any type of Comic Cons where editors would show up.
Hmm.
I just never chased it or went after it. And then I quit drawing. But I don't know what it was. 7 years ago, I was actually sitting in a park in Memphis, Tennessee, where I lived at the time. And I was in between appointments and I was just doing paperwork and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I just happened to look over at this pavilion, and there was some young kids sitting there and just drawing and coloring and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, something just flipped in my head, and I was like, I want to draw again. And I
Nice.
immediately left the area right then, went straight to a Michael's, bought a bunch of art supplies. And while I worked my regular career, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I started drawing 2 to 4 to 5 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year straight,
Wow.
without a break. And then I started putting myself on social media. And within the first, I don't know, people were ordering commissions right away in the first 6 months. 6 months or so, I think I had my first cover for an indie project. And then after that, a few months later, another one, and then another, then another. And I think the first year I was doing this, I think I had 10 published covers, including
Wow.
stuff for Image Comics. And now here we are, as of this month, 6 years later, of doing it professionally. I've got 128 published covers under my belt in that time frame. So
Wow.
from Image Comics to Dynamite to tons of indie stuff, I've got to work on two of my personal grails with Vampirella,
Hmm.
and then Lady Death this past year with Brian Pulido. So those are two of my big grails checked off, and then I've landed covers for like Department of Truth and Haha, Ice Cream Man, Stray Dogs,
Hmm. Hmm.
Purgatory, and then tons of indie stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
been a
Uh,
little, it wasn't one of those cases where I hated my job and anything like that. And yeah, it was a strange change. So.
well, clearly this talent just lives in you. And what was it like picking up art supplies after that hiatus?
It was nerve-wracking, because you always have that nervousness of of even knowing where to start.
Hmm.
My main constraint, like I see a lot of new artists today, they try to jump on the scene and they try to jump out the gate right away doing commissions and trying to get work, and I think that's a bad way to do things. I
Yeah.
think what helped me, and of course the way I did it's not maybe not for everyone, but I think the fact that I took a solid year of drawing that 2 to 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, helped me in three ways, in my opinion. It helped me see my artwork progress fast enough that I didn't feel like I was losing pace or oh, this isn't going to work. Because when you draw 2 to 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, without missing a beat, your skill level, you're going to see those jumps every few months.
Hmm.
It isn't
Hmm.
like someone that draws, once a week,
Yeah.
or once a month. So I think that helped me tremendously. And then, of course, being in the insurance world, I understood how to work for myself. And if you don't go to the field and you don't do what you have to do, you don't make a paycheck. I
Hmm.
think that's another thing a lot of artists let happen to them in this industry and make it difficult is if you start getting distracted with so-called artist block or I don't feel good or my tummy hurts or whatever,
Right, right.
excuses some of these artists seem to have day in and day out, and it hinders you. So
Yeah.
by forcing myself to grind like that, it made me work when I did not feel like it.
Yeah.
It made me work when I was having doubts about my artwork and myself. I just kept going with that stubbornness. So, and then it also, I think it teaches you to, by doing it the way I did it, and I think it helped me, is it taught me how to handle the workloads.
Yeah.
Because once you really get a bite, the gates open up. I mean, people are wanting commissions, people are wanting covers. I mean, it definitely it's a lot of work, and it can be. When I went and was buying art supplies the first time, I was super nervous 'cause I didn't even know where to start, like I mentioned.
Hmm.
And I just kind of focused on, okay, well, let me just draw. Let me not worry about whether I can make it. Let me not worry about what supplies I really need. I bought the basics and I just started grinding like that, And then after that year mark, I started putting myself on social media. I created an art page. I created a couple of art groups and started sharing artwork out to all the comic groups and stuff like that. And it just kind of started snowballing. So.
So, since that time of going and getting some of those tools, have you expanded? Have you, and I've kind of gone off the question trail here because I'm
No,
interested.
you're
So,
fine.
have you expanded your techniques? Are you trying new things?
I did there for a little while. So I used to do airbrushing a long time too. So I've even kind of implemented airbrushing a little. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there for a little while, oh, let me try watercolor. Oh, let me try color pencils. Let me try alcohol markers, or let me try paints, acrylic paints, etc. And I got a cabinet full of art supplies that hasn't been touched,
Yeah.
because I'm a traditional artist. And I finally made my mind set up that, okay, let me stop again distracting myself with all this other stuff that I
Hmm.
don't I don't need to do. Let me go back to concentrate on what I'm here to do, and that's to be a penciler and inking my work and learning that process. I do color when I'm doing commissions and stuff like that, but I stick to one type of format with like alcohol markers, Copics, things like that. I stay away from the color pencils, really. I stay away from paints and watercolors and all that because I definitely saw that it was becoming too much of a distraction.
Yeah.
And with the workload I was starting to get, and knock on wood for that, and I'm so grateful for that, I didn't really and truly have the time to try to learn other palettes of
Hmm.
of, of
Hmm.
style work. So some of it I still would love to learn. I see what some of these folks will do with oil paints and and even color pencils, especially. But I'm like, I just don't have the time for it. So I think that's another one that we artists have to be super careful about because it's super easy to go, oh, I want to learn that and I want to learn that.
Yeah.
And you end up taking away from what you're getting paid to do. So
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes total sense. Uh, you mentioned Brian Pulido, Lady Death, and that brings to mind some of the people along the way that may have been inspirations. Any particular
yeah.
places that you go that you point back to in your creative lineage?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the 80s.
Hmm.
I was born in 75. So I grew up with, classic X-Men and which is really strange because back then when I was a kid, I was a major X-Men fan. Now as
Hmm.
an adult, when I got into comics again as an adult, I was more Batman.
Yeah.
DC, even now, most of the art I draw is usually DC related characters.
Hmm.
But as far as influences, I mean, Mark Silvestri will always be in my top five. Jim Lee will be in my top five. David Finch, as far as creators and stuff, people like Brian Pulido, and so it's there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, especially with Chris Claremont and the things he did with the books.
Hmm.
Joe Rubenstein and some of the old schools, Neil Adams. A lot of people they like to give Neil Adams a lot of crap. But Neil Adams just one of those guys, and my mentality is kind of the same as Neil. I don't believe in excuses. I don't believe in lazy. I don't believe in artist block. I don't believe in any of that BS. I believe you do what you're supposed to do. You stand by your word and you do your project. So a lot of those interviews I heard with Neil, matched a lot of the way my grandfather talked, and that's who raised me.
Hmm.
So it's a lot
Hmm.
of that old generation that we don't have time for sick, we don't have time for hurt, we got work to do. So when I hear Neil do those interviews and I hear people kind of throw a little shade at Neil, and I'm like, Neil's just one of those guys, or was one of those guys. If you didn't want honest truth, you didn't ask Neil.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you wanted some sugar-coated lie, Neil was not the one to ask. So Neil was a big influence on me. Like I said, listening to his interviews about how it's, you gotta keep your word, you gotta do your work. And then of course, old school Jack Kirby. I think
Hmm.
he's at the roots of any artist that has to do with comics.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard not to throw his name in there, but as far as like overall artistic styles, like a lot of my art tends to look um stylized a bit more like Jim Lee.
Hmm.
I've watched so many hours upon hours of YouTube videos of Jim Lee. Certain characters I draw has a bit of Jim Lee flair to it, because I used to sit around and draw Jim Lee Batman so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, so those are definitely, I would say, as far as more recent stuff, I'd say definitely Mark Silvestri, definitely Jim Lee, David Finch, and also not just because of their artistic, their personality, their humbleness, the way they treat fans.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, Jim Lee, and I'll just say this real quick, and this is what's big for me, because I don't care who you are. You put your pants on the same way I do, so I don't put
Hmm.
nobody on a pedestal.
Hmm.
But Jim Lee's one of those, like, I've met lots of artists in this industry. I've never fanboyed over any of them. I think Jim would be the first one I ever did, even though I've been to several shows where he's at, but I don't have the time to go talk to him because I'm
Yeah.
slammed at my table, again, knock on wood. But when guys treat fans the way Jim does, the way Mark does, the way David does, that's a different ball game because there's a lot of artists in this industry that, in my personal opinion, I think they treat fans as a secondary thing. And
Hmm.
fans are the blood of this industry, period. Jim Lee could walk away tomorrow. David could walk away tomorrow. I could walk away tomorrow. This machine rolls on like it never missed a beat. But if the fans stop showing up,
Yeah.
we're in big trouble. So the
True.
fans matter. And I see how those guys talk to fans on their Twitch channel or their YouTube channel or in person. And, like Jim Lee is a great example. I was watching one of his Twitch channels one day, shows and live, and he was doing a draw along Supergirl. So he was teaching you how to draw Supergirl. And this was just a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I just happened to catch that episode. So I sat down, I started drawing Supergirl with him. And there was 1,000+ people in that channel. And he asked everybody at the end, say, hey, send me your Supergirls. I'm going to go through there and pick out a handful, and I'm going to share them to my Instagram.
Nice. Nice.
How
Yeah.
many artists do you know that say that? I
Yeah.
mean, you could probably count it on less than one hand that share their massive platforms with up and comers or rookies.
That's
And
cool.
luckily, out of the 13 that he picked, he picked my Supergirl to put on his Instagram. So,
Nice.
that's why they're my grails. That's why they're still a big influence to me is now because of how I see how they treat fans.
Yeah, yeah. That's been one of the nice things of doing this channel and this podcast has been reaching out to people, and overwhelmingly people are kind. You get the occasional
Yeah.
person that doesn't answer, and that's fine. People are busy and all that makes sense. But it's been great to connect with people and just see how the kindness is there for so many.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of great people in this industry. And like I said, there's a reason I have a t-shirt hanging in my closet that I had made that says check your ego, you're drawing comics, not storming beaches. So so there are some out there that has that, don't you know who I am? And of course I've had
Mhm.
that slung at me before and I just, yeah, I know who you are and it still doesn't matter to me.
Yeah,
So, so there's a lot of great people. There is some rough spots, and that's like that in anything.
right.
Just concentrate on the good ones, and shine, share your platforms with those type of people. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's one hell of a ride, that's for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I've gotten to meet some of the most incredible people, that I looked up to growing up and things like that. I
Hmm.
mean, there's even right back there, that Wolverine, that's a Joe Rubenstein original
Oh,
Wolverine that I got from
wow.
him at a C2E2 one year.
Nice.
I've got a air oh my goodness, am I seriously gonna have a brain fart now on her name? Dawn Mateague. I got a Dawn Mateague original Batman hanging over there. And
Awesome.
she's
Awesome.
an absolute sweetheart. And that's another example of one of those great artists who's extremely talented, extremely popular, and she'll answer a PM anytime you send her one,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Very
it's
cool.
it's a it's a blast, that's for sure. It's a lot of work, but it's a blast.
Any projects, any creative collaborations that have been especially just positive and that you look back on fondly?
Um, I definitely think collaboration wise, I've had a wonderful time working on my own creator-owned IP with Psycho Sal.
Hmm. Hmm.
Psycho Sal's been out a couple of years now. We're one of the fastest producing indie books on the market. We drop an issue about every 3 months. That's really big in the industry market because most indie books take a year to come out or 2 years before you see the next issue.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
getting to work with people like Chris Hayes, who helped write my first three books for Psycho Sal. So I'm not a writer per se. So I sit down and I write pages upon pages of notes of what I need to happen and where the story is going and who's involved. And I give that to Chris, and he has to go through there and dissect that and turn it into a legitimate comic script. And, Chris is one of those people also that fans first. If he gives you his word, he means it.
Hmm.
If he says he's your friend, he means it. And like I said, he helped me bring this to light with Psycho Sal. So getting to work with him on that very personal level has been incredible. And then, of course, getting to do covers for him for Don't Pay the Ferryman, which is one of
Hmm.
the top selling indie books out there in the
Hmm.
true indie.
It's a
Now,
great one.
I consider Image Comics big boy now.
Right.
Even though they are independent, but they're the big three. They're part of DC and Marvel as the big three.
Yeah.
So when you look at self-published, true, legit indie, Chris Hayes has over 20,000 copies of Don't Pay the Ferryman #1 printed and sold.
Hmm.
That's huge. So getting to do covers with him, for Don't Pay the Ferryman, Nut Brigade, Mother's Whisper, and all these other books. Like I said, it's always been a great thing. Those have been a lot of fun. Getting to work with Lori Calcaterra, the creator and
Yeah.
writer of Path of the Pale Rider.
Hmm.
She's writing issues 4, 5, 6, and 7 of Psycho Sal for me because we do this crazy perspective changes in the books.
Yeah.
And we wanted different writers for those perspectives, so it felt different to the readers.
Yeah.
So that's been an incredible experience. As far as for any of the super big names out there, landing my first cover for Dynamite Comics with Vampirella, that was huge.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that was a fun experience dealing with Image directly. Even though it was a retailer exclusive, I still talked to them directly for the project and stuff like that. Brian Pulido, I love Brian.
Yeah.
Brian's the Kickstarter whisperer. Uh, and he's another example of someone that if he gives you his word, he stands by it.
Mhm.
He's all about the fans. I've seen him at shows. I've watched how he's interacted with fans. He's incredible with them. He's so appreciative of them, and that's how it should be.
Yeah.
That was a very fun, unique experience there. Because, like I said, Lady Death, I read that book growing up through the 90s and stuff. So I was a big fan of that book too. Especially because with the way Brian, even though he makes her sexy and he makes her beautiful, it isn't sexualized. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like the way some people cop out these days when it's a pretty girl.
Yeah.
You know the covers I'm talking about these days. That he just gets carried away.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
that one was a unique, and I'm super grateful for that one because I was at a Comic-Con in Memphis and Brian was there, and I talked to him for a little while, went over and said hey to him. And my oldest daughter, Shelby, just happened to be with me at that show, and she knew who Brian was. She's a bit of a comic nerd, a little bit. Most of my girls are, but Shelby's a bit more. And he came by the table while I'm sitting there at the table. He came by. I thought he was just walking by to say hi. And he's looking at my print wall of all the different artwork I've done and things like that. And we got to talking about comics. We got to talking about fans and how they should be treated. And, so we kind of had this agreement going. And then he just all of a sudden goes, hey, you know what? I'm going to put you on the next cover of Lady Death. I was like, wait, what? And Shelby's eyes were huge, and I was like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, yeah. He's like, send me a PM as soon as you get home. I've got one that's going to come out in about the next 3 months or so. He's like, we'll put you on that one. Send me some design ideas. We'll have you do this close-up headshot style piece of her. And I was like, oh my God. And so that
Wow.
was
Yeah.
probably one of the most unique because it was just kind of spontaneous.
Yeah.
It wasn't me sending him a message or anything asking for work, or it was in person and right there in front of my daughter. And
That's
so that
cool.
one was great. That was probably my one of my favorite experiences. Yeah.
And all the cooler that you got to share it with a
Yeah.
family member with your daughter that way. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really cool, and I'll always hold Brian in that high regard for that because he didn't have to do that. I mean,
Hmm.
he's got hundreds of people beating down his, probably thousands of people beating down his doors to do a cover for his IPs, and then he already has a stable of well-known artist that's been in the business 10, 15, 20 years. And here I am in it 6 years. I mean, yeah, I understand I've done 128 plus published covers. I get that. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm still a newborn, walking around this. And the fact that he was willing to do that is, like I said, that says a lot about who he is.
Yeah. Well, with so much already accomplished, I am, of course, curious about the creative vision. Where would you like to take things next? Next projects? Any particular areas, IPs you'd like to tackle next in the
Yeah,
journey?
yeah. We Psycho Sal, the first story bit for that book wraps up in 2 issues. Number 8 is almost done written and go to art here soon. Then we have issue number 9, but I also have a one-shot comic. I finally took a stab at trying to write my own thing, and
Nice.
I wrote the story, the short story. I even wrote the script, 100% mine. Like I didn't bug Chris or Lori to help me with this one. I did send it to them, had them proofread it and see what they thought, and they loved it. It took me about 5 months to write the story. A little bit here, a little bit there, and then changing it 1,000 times, because you don't feel it's good enough or whatever.
Right,
But I'm
right.
super excited about that one. That's Cursed Moonlight. That's a werewolf comic, one-shot comic that actually has two of my daughters in it.
Oh,
So
cool.
it's only three people in the book. It's the werewolf, and then it's my daughter Olivia and my her twin sister Victoria, and it has to do with them being in the woods in a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains.
Uh,
So I'm super excited about it. The script's done. It's polished. It's ready to go. Then of course the big thing we've got coming in 2025 is Curse of the Blood Moon.
mhm.
That is, from what we've been able to research and tell, will be the largest indie book on the market. That one
Nice.
will have 30 issues. That's huge in the self-published indie market. Now
Hmm.
that one's dealing with werewolves, vampires, witches, demons, angels. Think supernatural on crack.
Nice.
I mean, it's going to be all out crazy. That's the one everybody's super excited about because, like I said, that's a large format style comic. Lots of story, lots of character building, lots of depth. It's not something pushed super fast, and it's one of those things. If it has to go past 30 issues to make it work, it'll go past.
Hmm. Hmm.
One of the great things about the way I do my books, and that's one of the reasons Psycho Style is one of the fastest producing, is most people may not realize this. Kickstarters, most people doing Kickstarters, and there's nothing wrong with this. I'm just saying most people, they need the money from their Kickstarters to produce their books. So
Hmm.
when you see a Kickstarter go live, they might have 1 or 2 pages of the book drawn so they can show the backers what it looks like. They may have 1 or 2 covers done so they can show you that on the Kickstarter. But 9 times out of 10, they have to wait for that Kickstarter in, collect the money from all the backers, then put that into finishing the book. And that's why you see some of these books, most of these books are one a year, two a year at best.
Hmm.
So I don't want my readers waiting that long because I'm a big believer in that out of sight, out of mind thing. So
Hmm.
I actually fund my books 100%. They're 98% done before the Kickstarter is turned on.
Oh, wow.
Everyone's paid, everyone's done. The only thing that we've got left to do is a little bit of lettering, and
Mhm.
that's it. And we'll carry that same procedure on to Cycle of the Blood Moon. So our goal is to drop one of those books, uh, Cycle of the Blood Moon, every 3 months, in 2.5 to 3 months. So we're
Yeah.
going to carry that into that too, because like I said, we want to keep that very quick publication going. But it's one of those things, like I said, this book is highly detailed. The characters are super fleshed out to where you get attached to them and things like that, and you understand their backstories. We're not rushing anything on this one. So
Hmm.
we're aiming for 30. If it goes past that, so be it. That one,
Nice.
that's going to be the big boy. So
Cool.
that's the two major things that's coming this year.
Cool. Cool. Have a very busy and productive time ahead.
Yeah, this one, like I said, it's going to be a busy year because I'm doing all of this, with the help of Charter Comics and Chris Hayes and then Lori, and
Hmm.
that'll help with some of this stuff that deals with Cycle of the Blood Moon. So it's definitely a team effort. I'm bringing on a new artist to do the interior work because sadly, as busy as I am with the covers, I'm doing because I do anywhere between 14 to 20 Comic-Con appearances a year too. So
Hmm.
I drive to all my shows. So it's everywhere from Florida to New York to Texas to Wyoming, and everywhere in between. So
Yeah.
I have to hire someone to, and of course that costs me more money. But I have to hire someone to do the interior art. Because if I was trying to do it in my own free time, we would be getting one issue a year, if we're lucky. But I've got all these IP ideas in my head that I really want out there. So yeah, it's going to be a crazy busy year for sure. But I think it's going to be worth it. I think the fans are going to have a blast with, especially Cycle of the Blood Moon.
Yeah. I'm a Lori Calcaterra fan as well.
Yep, she's
I've
awesome.
enjoyed her stuff and interviewed her on here and things like that. So glad for that connection. If people out there want to go, if they want to support the work, see the art, and do things like that, where are some spaces they might go that could be conventions online or a little both?
Yeah, yeah. So the best thing for them to do these days is they can either join the art group on Facebook, Art of William Russell. I've got two art groups, an art page on Facebook, all of it at Art of William Russell. The main thing they really want to do if they want to stay in the know about Comic-Con appearances, new books dropping, cover releases, things like that, sales, events, my website for sure.
Hmm.
They need to make sure they're subscribed to the website www.artofwilliamrussell.com, and I'll send you all that information so you can put it on your video.
Great.
But that's the main thing they want to do, and tell them don't worry, we don't spam people's emails. I send out 1 to 2 emails a month, and I don't even do that every month, so they don't have to worry about that. They definitely want to make sure they're following Charter Comics. because Psycho Sal, Cursed Moonlight, Psycho the Blood Moon, all of that's under published under Charter Comics. Chris Hayes's books with Don't Pay the Ferryman and Nut Brigade and all these other great books are under that label too, along with Lori and Path of Pale Rider and things like that. Michael Henson's Disputed Territory, and there's a bunch of other books. Those are just some of the main ones that people are following. But yeah, they definitely want to make sure they join the website, make sure they subscribe, and they'll stay in the know about everything. So.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, we've covered a good bit of ground. Is there anything that we've missed that you want to make sure to include?
No, no, other than you guys definitely make sure you check out Psycho Sal. You can order all back issues off the website. And for those that may not understand or know what that's about, Psycho Sal is about a serial killer set in New Orleans in the 1980s. We have broke the mold on how some of the storytelling is being done with the perspective changes through the book. It is definitely a one hell of a roller coaster ride. And even if you're not a horror fan, you definitely want to check it out. I've got fans that are not horror chasers at all, and they are
Yeah,
hooked on Psycho Sal. So
nice.
definitely give it a read. It's more of a psychological thriller, but it's definitely got the horror elements in it. We wanted to go back to classic horror storytelling where the bad guys are the bad guys. So
Mhm.
he's not cracking jokes. He's not cutting one-liners. There's no sob backstory for you to maybe feel sorry about. He's just 6'5", 300 pounds of pure mean rolling.
Yeah,
And there's a
yeah.
whole lot of backstory that hasn't been exposed yet that's going to shine light on a lot of things that are happening coming soon. So,
Very nice. Very nice. Good storytelling is good storytelling, right?
yes, it is.
All right. Well, William, great to talk with you. Glad to have you back anytime. It's an open channel, open invitation.